Good morning, everyone. Today I'll be talking about billionaires who have made their money in the tech industry. I will be making examples from the show Silicon Valley. And to begin with, let's do some historical analysis. I'll, we can all notice the similarities between John D. Rockefeller, Cornelius Vanderbilt, Andrew Carnegie, and JP Morgan with today's tech royalty, which would be Google, Amazon, Netflix, web services, YouTube, things like that. So we have these huge monopolies in the past from the Gilded Age, and they were called robber barons back in the day. And today they are nothing but tech money royalty. So these were the captains of the industry back in the day, and this was a justification that they gave for their high status, unequal access to resources, and legendary wealth. So this is the same logic that Mark Zuckerberg and Elon Musk use today to talk about their unequal access to wealth and resources. They justify themselves as captains of today's industry, and by making the world a better place, they are actually problem solvers. They're actually the solutions to climate change, space travel, international connectivity. They are the solutions, and that is why they need this access to wealth to be able to provide for the world, just like Carnegie did when he mentioned it in the Gospel of Wealth. And this is also how they form monopolies, just like how the robber barons were huge monopolies, with the Sherman Antitrust Act being used against them to break down Standard Oil, for example. Just like that, about 20 years ago, Bill Gates had lost Microsoft and was essentially given the same ruling. It was proved that the Microsoft was taking part in antitrust activities. It was having too much of the market share, just like how Standard Oil produced too much oil in the country, and how we have these tech giants like Google, Amazon, Meta, and Microsoft, and they have taken over social media, the internet, communication, even X with Twitter, and Starlink with Elon Musk. And then we get to the show, which is about the Silicon Valley of today, or at least 10 years ago, because the show ended 10 years ago. And we get introduced to the cast. We get introduced first to Erlich Bachman. He is the one who owns the incubator. They have this incubator in which they have four engineers living inside the house rent free in exchange for 10% of the company, and in case it goes successful. And that is exactly how Erlich Bachman makes his money in the show. Erlich Bachman's one of his incubees, Richard Hendricks, as we see in the red jacket in the middle. He's the one who comes up with this legendary idea of Pied Piper. His idea is that he can compress memory and storage better than everybody else. He has a higher Weisman score, as they call it in the show. He has a much better way of transferring and storing information. There are many different versions of this, of the same idea, and they keep on changing throughout the show. And in the very first episode, he first gets an offer for $100,000, then for $500,000, then for $1 million, then for $5 million, and then finally gets an offer for $10 million by Gavin Belson, who's the main villain of the show. So he just gets offered $10 million for an idea he just has, and it has been coded up. It has a very preliminary phase, but it has not been used for the ideas that Gavin Belson wants to use. And this is exactly what we see today. We see Google, Meta, and all these huge companies buying smaller companies like Vezo for navigation in California, or let it be WhatsApp when Facebook bought it. They buy all of these smaller startups, and they make unfair advantage of these, when the CEOs of these startup founders have no idea what's going on. They have no idea to this kind of amount of money. He gets offered $10 million today, but at the end of the show, he gets offered $1 billion for Pied Piper. So should he have taken it? That is the reaction that we see. In fact, when he visits his doctor, and his doctor is making fun of him for having taken the money. And then Richard says, "No, I haven't taken the money." And the doctor says, "Oh, no, I was making fun of you for having taken the money." So there's a funny back and forth going on between, no matter what decision you make, you're kind of screwed anyways, because when money enters a person's life, it changes it. So just like how Richard Hendricks is starting to feel the lust, the reward, the power of this new money, of this tech money that he has just stumbled upon. And let's see how he goes through it. Gavin Belson. Gavin Belson is this huge billionaire. He's the CEO and founder of Hooli. Hooli, I would say, is a good example of today's like social media or Apple. I would say it's a good mixture of Google, Meta, and Apple for today. We'll see the services it offers, but I would just like to point out that Gavin Belson is very, very, very exaggerated in the show. He's been compared to being racist, to being sexist, to being rude, to having plagiarized other authors, and the list just goes on and on and on. And this is a good exaggeration for humorous purposes, but I do think it is not far from reality. I do think Gavin Belson is a very good representation of today's tech money royalty. And we see the art of the presentation by Gavin Belson when he very unkindly and very rudely uses other animals as props in his presentation. He brought in a bulldog to show an example of how he had failed in one of his like endeavors, and he had wasted and burned billions of dollars for Huli. And we also see him using elephant to make an example about how he'll never forget someone who crosses him or something like that. So as we see in this photo, Gavin Belson is talking about the portfolio of the company Huli that he's the founder and CEO of. We have Huli Docs, Huli Notes, Huli Sheets, Huli Slides. These could very well be the Google Suite or even the Microsoft Suite. They have a calendar, chatting app, maps, mail, or even Find My iPhone. They have Find Huli Phone. They also offer services like glasses and even Huli PC. And they also have Schooly, which is pretty funny. But yeah, so this is very similar to what Google, Meta, and um, yeah, these tech companies today are offering. So the controversy comes to this point. The controversy is when Gavin Belson uh, unleashes Tethics. Tethics is short for for technology ethics, and this is a code of ethics that Gavin Belson has come up with in the show. And he preaches that as the ex CEO of Huli, he should be the one leading the industry, being the captain of the industry, and how everybody should be following him. And this is very similar to what Meta has for community standards, Google has for AI principles, Microsoft has for ethical principles. This is also similar to what Bill Gates did with his Giving Pledge. So not only is Tethics similar to reality, but it is also true in the case that it is very hypocritical. Gavin Belson is the most hypocritical person in the show. We see that Tethics is widely hated upon by Richard Hendricks, who's the protagonist, and he's the most ethical person in the show. At the end of second season, he was given the opportunity to be gone scot free and with his company if he lied in open court, if he committed perjury, but he did not. He chooses to go down with his company and loses the court case because he believes and has a strong ethical code. So this is what the controversy that we see in the show with ethics is all about. And as we see when the show is heading towards the end, we have Russ, who is another billionaire, and he is the prime example of Weblinnian consumption of consumption that is completely unnecessary, of conspicuous consumption, and how he has this very high loyalty to Tres comos being the three commas that you have to write when you have $1 billion. So he launches his whole brand called Tres comos, and the show ends with him launching a Russ Fest, which is very similar to these musical festivals that celebrities and even like tech money royalty throw in today's world. So this is not a bad example of what today's study looks like, and I will be talking briefly about how it connects to other billionaires in other industries right now. So while we approach the ending of the show, we have the Rust Fest happening, and at the end, the Rust Fest is very successful. The launch goes amazing, and they're about to do the first IPO. They're about to do the initial offering to the world, and they're about to become the new billionaires. But at the end, what happens is that they find out that Richard Hendrick's idea of Pied Piper is not very successful in the sense that it is so good that it is actually harmful to the internet if they release it. If they release Pied Piper, they're going to break down encryption all over the world, and it's actually harmful to the world if they release their own service. So we see this similarity with other TV shows and other movies that we've talked about in the class. We see how Hannah Hathaway in Devil Wears Prada, at the end of the movie, she decides to quit the fashion industry, even though she's very good at it, even though she's very successful at it. She decides to choose it, to quit it. And Bud Fox, we have Bud Fox at the end of Wall Street quitting the finance industry because he's so good at it. Just like that, we have Richard Hendricks, who is so successful in Silicon Valley. He's so successful in the tech industry that he has to quit it, even though he got his lucky break. He's able to become a CEO when he was just a mere coder, and then he gets rich, he gets attracted to the power and the status, and not only has to he receive the funding, but he also has to make the startup successful. He has to be a good CEO, and he has to complete an impossible task, and he does this every season and every season, and at the end he reaps the reward of becoming the tech industry's top 1%. So the show ends on a very high note in which he reaches his dream. He realizes his dream. He's a professor at Stanford, and his startup has failed, but he's ethical. He did everything he ever wanted to, and he has lived a life with no regret. And we also see Gavin Belson becoming a writer and author, in which he plagiarizes others' memoirs of short fiction, and yeah, that's how he spends the last of his days. So with the conclusion, I like to connect it with the rest of the class. We have this new money defined. We have a source of new money, just like how during the gold rush or during the gilded age we have these monopolies answering to the government. Just like that, we have today in Silicon Valley the owners of Meta, Google, coming in front of Senate and having answer to the questions and decisions that they have taken and the decisions that they have undergone. So I couldn't tell the difference between which is reality and which is a TV show. But on the right, we have the CEO of Pied Piper, Richard Hendricks, from the show Silicon Valley, coming in front of Senate to try to justify his service and proving that he is very ethical. And we have Mark Zuckerberg, who is the owner of Meta and also multiple social media platforms such as Instagram and WhatsApp and Facebook. And he's coming in front of Senate to justify his use of the service and saying that he respects privacy just as much as the next billionaire does. So this show does a very good example of trying to portray reality. But again, not everybody's the same. We also have the giving pledge in reality from tech money royalties like Bill Gates. We also have the conjoined triangles of success from Barker from the show Silicon Valley, in which he talks about this NBA aspect about how you have more growth, you have more engineering, but the end of the day, the marketing team has to meet with the engineering team and form a compromise. So this is the MBA example that he gives, and there are a lot of billionaires in the show Silicon Valley, and he is relatively good in which he's investing billions in public health and education, just like Bill Gates does in, I would say, in reality. So just like how we have other billionaires in reality that are not similar to the blood money royalty that we see like all over the news, just like that in the show we also have Peter Gregory, also Russ Hanneman and Jack Barker, as well as Big Head and other venture capitalists who are not as cruel and do provide a lot of nuance to this tech money royalty that we're seeing now in the show. We have Jack Barker with his conjoined triangle of success. We also have Big Head, who makes a lot of money by surprisingly not doing anything. He's unassigned at Hooli, but he gets a lot of name and recognition from his TED Talk, which is about nothing. So he makes a lot of money. I mean, it's all fair to him, but there are just multiple approaches, and there's a lot of not that smart, not that many rich, smart people going around in Silicon Valley who are ready to throw money at you for just branding it right for them. So that's just how it works in Silicon Valley. So, how these tech monopolies are trying to ruin innovation is by following the six different mantras that I've looked into that are common in the show Silicon Valley as well as the reality Silicon Valley. So we have these economies of scale. We have Hooli, which is this massive, massive company, which has really unfair advantages because in technology, it is the first mover that has this advantage. It is the one that just has a larger scale that has advantage because you cannot have a second Facebook today because there already exists a first Facebook, because nobody else would be willing to join the second Facebook because of the network effect or economies of scale. So they have these huge walls to the garden or the ecosystem. Or another popular example of economies of scale would be Apple only allowing iPhone, AirPods, and Mac to integrate into its garden ecosystem. So it's building these walls around it so that nobody else can try to fit in, try to take advantage of all the hard work that they have done. The next example would be acquisitions. These are examples where Hooli in Silicon Valley tries to buy Pied Piper for $10 million, but also in reality, in which WhatsApp was bought by Facebook for its social media benefits. It was a small startup. It was way undervalued when it was bought. Just like that, at the end of the show, Richard Hendricks is offered $1 billion, 100 times more than he's offered by Gavin Belson at the end of the first episode for Pied Piper. So should he have sold it, or are just these huge corporations taking unfair advantage of these smaller startups? The third example would be lawsuits that these massive corporations throw at these smaller firms that have nothing, like they don't know what's going on. Gavin Belson at the end of second season tries to sue Richard Hendricks for his employment contract. He sues Richard for trying to prove that he developed Pied Piper using computers and using Wi-Fi from the Hooli campus. So therefore, the intellectual property of Pied Piper, it belongs to Gavin Belson and Hooli as well, and not only to Richard Hendricks. So he could have easily lied in this situation, but he chooses not to lie, and he believes in his ethics. He believes in technology ethics even before Gavin Belson makes it a thing in season 5. In season 2, Richard fights off this lawsuit and is successful at the end, and gets to keep his company Pied Piper without even lying and committing perjury in open court. Fourth strategy that they use is that they try to copy. Hooli tries to copy Endframe, which is just another ripoff of Pied Piper. Because if we cannot stop you, we can just join you in the race. So that's literally what's happening with these massive corporations. And we see this when Snapchat tried to unlock this new feature of stories, of temporary stories of only 24 hours. Instagram copied it right away. YouTube has this feature of short videos. Instagram copies it right away with vertical short form videos as well. And so this is just how it happens in Silicon Valley. And the fifth example would be patents. Just like how old music has this ambiguous patents on new music, just like that, old technology, and they file these vague copyrights throughout the show in Silicon Valley. And Richard Hendricks keeps getting attacked on his app store. We're trying to launch his video calling service by these vague copyrights, and it does not go well in the episode because they have been constantly targeted by these innovation ruining larger multinational corporations. And the last strategy that they use is signaling. They signal, they do a lot to promote the fact that they sign these pledges, they take part in these marathons for breast cancer, they take part in all of these sustainable developments. But at the end of the day, they turn out to be something like Enron. They do this just so they can make a much larger negative impact on the world somewhere else. So we see this throughout Silicon Valley, the show, as well as in reality. And so when we connect it back to the class, we see that there's a lot of conspicuous and Veblendian consumption with the Rust Fest. And we also see how Karl Marx had said that rich people would try to take over the world. Brian Johnson invests a lot of money in medicine. Elon Musk invests a lot of money in SpaceX. Mark Zuckerberg took his money, invested it into VR. So we have Elon Musk making all of his money from PayPal, putting it into SpaceX and Tesla. We have Mark Zuckerberg making a lot of money from Facebook and putting it into Meta and Ray-Ban glasses. So we have these rich people trying to influence and shape the world, just like how Karl Marx had predicted, and just like how Carnegie argues that rich people should be pledging. Rich people should be not only investing, they should also be donating to where they think is fit. So we have Gavin Belson launching Tethix, like we have the Giving Pledge by Bill Gates. And we also see a lot of Pareto inequality going around in Silicon Valley. We see it is very clear when Richard Hendricks had to negotiate with Gavin Belson. It is not a fair comparison. It's just not. It's just so much money on one side of the table that it just doesn't make sense to have a fair negotiation. And then we also have the land tax, just like how Erlich Bachman has this incubator in which they have Jing Yang, they have Guilfoyle, they also have Dinesh and Richard all living under it. He literally owns 10% of their company for letting them live rent free on it. So this is a very modern example of the land tax, and how Henry George had predicted it. Nobody would have thought it would have come down to this, but yes, Adam Smith and the role of capitalists that he had predicted have all come true. Just like we have Peter Gregory, which is a good billionaire trying to do good in the world. He's trying to fight Gavin Belson. He was trying to take over his company for $10 million. Instead of that, Peter Gregory is making a much reasonable 5% stake into the company so that Richard Hendricks can actually keep his company and let him take over the invisible hand and justify the economic power of the wealthy. And similarly, we have being Rustfest launched by the same founder of Tres Commerce, who is so he has his ego attached to $1 billion, but he's the one with the money. He's the one trying to use or abuse his economic power. And last but not the least, we have rentier capitalism and population growth being targeted by the employees of Huli, and they're also trying to jump ship from Google to Amazon to Netflix, or from Huli to Pied Piper. So that's how this is going to end, talking about the philanthropy that Huli takes over. These are just modern day gilded age versions of libraries and universities that today's billionaires funds are trying to take over just so that they can make a good public image and they can keep public perceptions high. As we saw they had the interview with Elon Musk, it looks eerily similar to the interview that Gavin Belson had on the show Silicon Valley, in which they talk about how billionaires are being persecuted in America. Is this true? I don't know. Gavin Belson thinks so on the show. Does Elon Musk think so in reality? Does the show do a good reflection on that part? Public opinion is split on this. Public opinion believes that Silicon Valley, as being shown in the show, is not how it is in reality. People believe that Silicon billionaires in real life are actually good. They want to do good for the world and not just avoid taxes. But on the other hand, the people also believe that they're just trying to avoid taxes and keep the most for themselves. So public opinion is split on this. But I do believe that Silicon Valley, the show, does a very good example and case study of today's modern Valley in reality. Thank you all for watching.